The shocking discovery of a private letter has thrown a shadow across the political stage and set off waves of speculation across the United States. The document, said to be an exchange between Melania Trump and Vladimir Putin, first appeared through a leak that many experts believe was no accident. Its timing, its wording, and the figures involved make it more than just a curious artifact from the past. If the letter is genuine, it challenges the way Americans have always viewed the former First Lady and forces a difficult question into the spotlight. How long have these connections really existed? The letter allegedly dates back to the late 1990s, a period when Putin was climbing into power in Russia and Melania was still carving her path from the modeling world of Europe to the bright lights of New York. The fact that such a communication even exists suggests there may have been ties far deeper than anyone imagined. Analysts argue that this kind of link could have been an early channel of influence, perhaps even a strategic relationship nurtured before Donald Trump became a major political figure. While skeptics urge caution, pointing to the need for verification, the very presence of the letter has stirred conversations that reach into the highest levels of government. For years, Melania has been portrayed as a private woman, detached from her husband's political battles, seemingly uninterested in the role of power. Yet this revelation paints her in a different light, one that suggests she may have had access to global figures and sensitive conversations, long before her face appeared on magazine covers or her name was attached to the role of First Lady. The possibility that she communicated with Putin is not just a detail, it is a puzzle piece that could alter the narrative of how influence and alliances formed around the Trump circle. Was she simply a woman caught in the crossfire of history, or was she quietly playing a part in shaping it? To answer that question, one must look back at her journey from Slovenia to the United States. Melania was born in a small town during a time when Slovenia was still part of Yugoslavia, a country deeply marked by the influence of communist regimes and Soviet power. Her father had ties to local politics, her mother worked in textiles, and the family lived under a system where Russian reach was never far away. These were the early years that shaped her worldview, and they cannot be ignored when discussing the possibility of hidden connections that as she pursued a modeling career across Europe, Melania traveled through cities where political and business elites often mingled with the glamorous faces of the industry. Intelligence experts now look back at this period and argue that it may have been the time when networks first noticed her, when friendships and opportunities could have opened doors beyond fashion and into circles of real power. By the time she moved to the United States, her name was no longer unknown in certain European circles, and the leaked letter suggests that her ties may have already reached into Moscow's orbit. Her life in America began like the dream of any ambitious immigrant, but when she met Donald Trump and eventually became his wife, everything changed. She moved from model to socialite, from supporting spouse to First Lady of the United States, and with that rise came access to some of the most guarded spaces in American politics. The letter now forces the public to ask whether this rise was purely coincidental, or whether invisible strings were pulling her toward a role that was always meant to be bigger than the world believed. The story of Melania is no longer just about beauty, elegance, or the quiet role she played beside her husband. It is about whether her journey carried with it a hidden past that connected her to one of the most powerful men in the world. If the leaked letter is authentic, it does not just alter the story of a former First Lady, it challenges the very way Americans understand influence, power, and the global games played long before the public ever sees them unfold. The letter that sparked so much debate has led many to examine more closely the claims of a connection between Melania Trump and Vladimir Putin. The suggestion that there was a line of communication between them is not simply tabloid noise, it strikes at the core of US national security concerns. Analysts are breaking down the possibility that what seemed like casual correspondence could have been much more. Some argue it may have been part of a subtle strategy, a way for Putin to maintain relationships that could one day serve his interests. Others believe it might have been harmless, a letter written in the flow of social or diplomatic courtesies that happened to involve someone who would later become First Lady. But even if innocent in nature, the existence of the letter makes people ask why such communication was happening at all. What unsettles experts is the timing. Putin was in the early stages of consolidating power in Russia, while Donald Trump was expanding his empire and reputation in America. Melania, caught between these worlds, was already transitioning from her European life into New York's high society. The overlap raises suspicions that her connection was more than accidental. Intelligence experts point out that foreign governments often look decades ahead, seeking out relationships, cultivating figures, and keeping networks alive for moments when they may become useful. A casual exchange on the surface can become a strategic tool behind the scenes. The revelations have turned public attention toward Melania herself. She has always been seen as quiet, composed, and distant from the storm of politics. But if she indeed maintains ties with Putin, even limited ones, her image as an apolitical figure is shattered. Suddenly she becomes a woman whose personal connections could have carried global implications. Some argue this explains why she often seemed more reserved, as if guarding secrets that could not be spoken aloud. Others claim this is exaggeration, that she was simply private by nature. But the possibility of a Putin connection makes her silence look less like detachment and more like calculation. The weight of these questions only grows when considering her role inside Trump's inner circle. From the outside, Melania appeared to remain on the edges of Donald Trump's political rise, focused on her family and avoiding the media spotlight whenever possible. Yet insiders suggest she may have had far more influence than people realized. She was not just a spouse watching from the sidelines, she was a confidant whose voice carried weight behind closed doors. She had access to moments when decisions were being made, and in those rooms her perspective mattered. Some close to the Trump circle recall times when Melania's advice shaped strategy, particularly in how Donald presented himself to the public and how he responded to criticism. Her European background and her understanding of international culture gave her a perspective that others inside the campaign lacked. When foreign leaders looked at the Trump family, Melania was often the bridge, the figure who could speak more easily in different contexts and carry herself with an elegance that softened the rougher edges of Trump's persona. In that role, her influence was subtle but undeniable. If the leaked letter is real, then Melania's role inside Trump's world takes on a new meaning. She may not have been the quiet, uninvolved first lady she was often portrayed to be, but instead a figure with connections that extended beyond Washington and into Moscow. This possibility has raised alarms among intelligence officials who now wonder whether her access to global leaders was a simple formality or part of a much deeper and carefully built network. These questions push Americans to confront uncomfortable ideas about power and influence. Was the First Lady of the United States unknowingly or knowingly linked to one of America's strongest rivals? Was she part of a strategy that stretched back years before her husband even considered politics? Or was she simply a woman caught between two worlds, her story twisted into conspiracy because of a letter whose true origins remain unclear? The answers are not certain, but the shadows cast by the leaked letter will not disappear quickly. They force the public to re-examine the story of Melania Trump, not as a distant figure standing silently by her husband, but as a woman whose past, present, and connections may hold greater significance than anyone realized. The narrative has shifted, and the questions surrounding her will continue to echo as long as the truth about her ties to Putin remains unresolved. The fallout from the leaked letter has unleashed a storm that shows no signs of quieting down. What began as a single revelation has now spiraled into a wave of questions, denials, and speculation that stretches from Washington to Moscow. The Trump camp has moved quickly to dismiss the letter as fake, labeling it as yet another attempt to smear the family. Yet the louder the denials grow, the more people seem to wonder if there is something hidden beneath the surface. Intelligence agencies have been pressured to weigh in, but their responses have been cautious, careful not to confirm or deny too much. This silence only fuels the fire, leaving Americans uneasy and questioning what is really being kept from them. In the political world, rivals have seized on the leak as evidence of dangerous connections. Critics argue that the letter is part of a much larger story, one that points to long-standing ties between the Trump orbit and Russian power. For them, the issue is not just about Melania but about the broader influence that Moscow may have tried to exert on America's highest office. Supporters, on the other hand, dismiss the entire scandal as manufactured drama designed to weaken